Hello and good morning, everyone. OnlyPositivity here. I have my coffee with me, ready to explore this new phase of life with you all. So over the past few years, I have gained a whole new perspective on life, and I've realized that life is too short to not be enjoying yourself while doing great things. So come along with me as I explore this new lens through fitness, photography, reading, traveling, cannabis, and much more. Looking forward to the journey, guys. And remember, OnlyPositivity. And we're live. What's good, bro?
Hey, what's up, man?
This is kind of a funny thing we're doing, right? Kind of interesting, you know?
I'm looking forward to it, though.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited, dude. Thanks for coming out here today, man. I know
Thanks for having me.
Sundays are busy, dude. Tomorrow's the work week starting up, dude. I appreciate you coming out here.
Oh, for sure. Anytime.
Yeah, man. So, how you feeling today, dude?
Feeling good.
Feeling good?
It's a beautiful day outside. Feeling good. Haven't seen you in a minute, so it's good to see you too, man.
Yeah, man. I'm glad we got to catch up for a couple hours before this, dude. You know, it's like it's really tough to get time on calendars and shit like that, dude. With this phase of life we're in, man. Like living by that Outlook calendar, dude. It's controlling my life these days, man.
I know, man.
Crack one of these hoes open. Welcome everybody.
But you sound like MC Vikram and Ludacris from back in the day.
Oh. But yeah, dude, how was what do you call it? Did you go out for lunch today? Did you guys do anything?
No, I mean I had something at home.
Get something at home.
I just had went from Mass to the grocery store, Pete's Fresh Market.
Dude, do you like Pete's or Trader Joe's better?
Trader Joe's for sure.
Joe's fucking awesome, dude.
I mean, the funny thing is, Steph got me on Trader Joe's, but I love Trader Joe's. But what's always funny is you go to Trader Joe's and then you have to decide the grocery store. You have to go after Trader Joe's to get the rest of the items that you need.
I went to Trader Joe's for the first time by myself on Thursday, and now I understand why Alyssa goes by herself like all the time. Because I normally do like like you said, you have to decide what store you have to go after.
Yeah.
So that store for me is Walmart. So all like, if like the body wash and like when you have like toothpaste and all that stuff and even like milk and stuff, I'll get from Walmart. But so I went there because she was going out of town, and I was like, dude, so I walked in and like before I even got in, some dude handed me a cart. And I was like, oh, thank you. And then I walk in right away, and like somebody's like, hey, good morning, welcome to Trader Joe's. I'm like, oh, thank you. I'm not used to this, dude. I'm used to Walmart where like, some lady's like beating her child, like, so I get in there and everything, the store's like not that big. Mm-hmm. So like everything's like intuitive, right? So when I had like, some carbs on my like tortillas, bread, right? That shit was like right where I thought it would be. Yeah. Right. And like the salads, like intuitive, right where I thought it would be. And like, the only thing that I couldn't find was this thing like called a mint oat chocolate bar, right?
Okay.
And I'll wrap this up at the end because, so I asked this lady, I was like, do you know where the mint oat chocolate bars are? Yeah. And she's like, she's like putting her hand on her head. She's like, And I'm like, oh, okay, I got you, Trader Joe's. This chick doesn't know where shit is. This is your like flaw, right? This is your crutch here. And then, so I'm like, you know what? I'll find it. It's okay. She's like, no. I know where the oat bars are, but I don't know if we have mint oat bars, right? So then I go to where the oat bars are, and she shows them to me. And then she's like, can I see your list though? Like, and then she looks at it. It says mini oat bars, and I was like, I gotta take that one back. I was like, ma'am, in my mind, I was saying bad things about you in Trader Joe's, but it's on me,
Happens to the best of us.
Mm-hmm. So I was like, man, I felt understood in Trader Joe's. I felt like
safe space.
Yeah, I felt unconditional love for the first time in my life. It was awesome, dude. But yeah, so I don't know if you have those similar experiences at Trader Joe's, but the one I just went to kind of rocked me, bro.
The thing about Trader Joe's I like is it's not overwhelming as it comes to another like supermarket. Yeah. They don't have that many options, which I think is better because you don't suffer from
paralysis by analysis.
Yeah, decision paralysis. You know, there's only so many options they have there. So in that regard, you know, you walk into sometimes like a Mariano's or like something like that, and you're like, well, should I get, you know, this type of yogurt or that type of yogurt, you know? And it's just like, what?
You got like, you got like the regular Oikos, you got 000, you got Chobani. You know, it's like there's too many. I just want one brand that's going to be good for me, dude. Just tell me what to get.
It's a little bit more minimalistic, and I think the older I get, I try to be a bit more minimalistic as opposed to be a maximalist.
Yeah. No, so then that's a good segue. Like, what about minimalism aside from what you just said is like the simplification of the decision making? What else about minimalism is like is calling you?
You know, there a couple of things. You know, I feel like one thing from a mental perspective, it just declutters your mind.
Yeah,
you know, the less stuff, especially unimportant or minuscule stuff, you have to think about, the more you can focus on bigger picture ideas and deeper things. If you're constantly, your mind is cluttered with like all these little minuscule or unimportant things. I find it that most people have difficulties concentrating on the bigger things in life. And the second thing is, you know, I think you realize, without, you know, getting too political or anything like that, I feel like the more materialistic you get, it's one way of living, but in my opinion, I think that's an unfulfilled way of living.
Yeah.
And you end up going down a path, and you oftentimes don't realize you lost your way in life until you're down that path, and getting back from that is the challenging part at that point. But I think prioritizing the things that you find important, and then, you know, that translates to the other parts of your life, goes a long way in this minimalistic philosophy. You focus on those things, and maybe those things that are important, you do them well or invest in those things. I feel like it goes a long way, as opposed to getting a bunch of little things that are everywhere.
No, I totally agree. Are you a to-do list kind of guy? You got to-do lists every day?
I used to be a to-do list kind of person. Mm-hmm. Now I kind of, you know, I think that it was from the Atomic Habits we talked about earlier. Now I focus on, like, you know, there's things I have to do, but then I prioritize them. Like, I try to focus on 3 maybe things I need to do. And then I make a to-do list if I have to, or like a shopping list if I have to go to the grocery store or something. Yeah. But I try not to do a to-do list, because I feel like I used to just do a to-do list for the sake of like completing things. But I felt like I was always completing lower level, like low-hanging fruit. Yeah. And I was not completing the big tasks. Sometimes those big tasks, you just got to jump into them, you know, and just do it.
Yeah. Because a to-do list can be like, exactly just like you said, it can be even more crippling. Yeah. You're just like, hey, I'm gonna put more like little things on my to-do list and say, look, I got all this shit checked off here. And then you're like, the one important thing, it's like, okay, hey, no, you didn't do that one. Yeah. And that's a big one about to-do list, dude. Like, I'm a big to-do list guy. Like, I just, you know, I like to, for some reason, there's some about putting pen to paper that I really like. I just like writing, so I like to, like, you know, physically check things off. But then, like, there's certain things that, you know, you'll write down, like fill gas, right? Like, that's something that you got to do, right? You need gas to drive places, but is it like the most effective thing that you need to cross off? Is there something else? Like, you know, one thing I really want to do is like try to meditate. Like 10 minutes. I'm like, I think that might be a good practice from what I've read about it. Yeah. But I always skip that. I always like don't write that one down, but that one I feel would be more beneficial in a lot of ways than filling my gas. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I don't know, like, but to your point, minimalism, less moving pieces, things like that, I think have always been like kind of a good mantra for me. It's like, hey, look, the more pieces are moving, the more you have to manage, and the more management, the more mental space you get attributed to that, and then you just don't have it. You know, sometimes it's good to like not fill your mental space with anything. You know? Yeah,
I agree.
But any case, we are here today to discuss what is it called? Siddhartha?
Yes.
It's just called Siddhartha by Herman. Is it Hesse?
I thought it was Herman Hesse, but I think the librarian corrected me. It's Herman Hesse.
Herman Hesse.
Hesse. I don't know. Hesse, something like that.
But well, Herman, you're fooling us all, dude.
We ignorant.
Ignorant, all right? I thought Herman Hesse had like some swag to it.
That's what I thought too. So when I was returning my copy, I was like, "Here's my copy of Siddhartha by Herman Hesse," and she's like, "It's Hesse," and I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Sorry, lady.
I haven't been back to the library since. So
you ruined the library for me, dude. Sorry, I'm not a straight library snob right there. It's Herman Hesse. Like, dude, I would be like, but can you understand how, like, why I would think it's Hesse? Can we both just like agree that,
I thought the E was silent. And I was like, all right.
There's no accent. There's nothing that's telling me that E has to be pronounced. Like, throw a Y on that bitch, dude. Make it Hessy if you want me to call you Hesse. Well, any case, we like this book, Herman. All right, if you're listening. So, right off the bat, I thought it was a really great read because it wasn't a Buddha story like I've heard before. Like I've you hear this story about, yeah, he was maybe brought up Hindu, right? And he kind of just like leaves a world of like pleasures and like the sensory world of submitting to his pleasures. And then he goes into the forest and becomes the Buddha through like some awakening, right? But in this one, he goes through the various phases of life and he actually indulges in them, I think. Like he kind of denounced his Hindu life, right? But then he went to the forest and did that ascetic like samana thing where he was like a yogi for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then when he did his thing with I forget, Kamala, was that her name?
Yeah, Kamala.
The shorty, when he was fully indulged in that life, right? Of being like a businessman and a merchant. Mm-hmm. And then he comes back to being like this dude who's like back on the ferry and being very like, like he becomes simple, right? He just working that ferry with that guy trying to like go up in the mountains and stuff. So to me, it was a lot different because he went through fully those various phases of life. He didn't just denounce from the start. So before we get into any of like the specifics of those areas, what were your early on sense? Did you carry those themes through, or was it something else that hit you?
I would agree with you, and I feel like one of the nice things about this book is it's not like you mentioned, it's not a traditional like Buddhist book where you need to have a in-depth knowledge of Buddhism or Hinduism. So one of the things I learned about Herman Hesse after reading this book was that the author himself was his family was they were missionaries to India. Yeah. So he was heavily influenced by Buddhism and Hinduism, but he doesn't make this book like only for people with profound knowledge or expertise in Buddhism or Hinduism or their philosophy. He makes it very accessible, and because I didn't go into it as like some Buddhist expert, but the little that I did know about Buddhism and the traditional story of the Buddha was that, that he achieved enlightenment or became the enlightened one through destruction of his ego.
Right.
And that's how most, like you mentioned earlier, most Buddhist texts or stories, go, destruction of the ego. But this novel like flips it on his head, and he experiences what many would say like at least 3 or 4 different lives, all in one lifetime. You know, he became an ascetic. He then jumped and became a businessman, and then from a businessman he became kind of like led a very hedonistic lifestyle. Gambled, had all these like leisures and pleasures and stuff like that, and then he went back and became this man of nature, and became a river crossing ferry.
Like randomly, right?
But he like lived all these experiences. So I agree with you. I felt like the same way. I thought it was, I went into it thinking because the name was Siddhartha, which is the Buddha's original name. I thought it was going to be like a kind of like a story of the Buddha, but the irony is it was kind of like an opposite of what the Buddha did to achieve enlightenment. It
was kind of like deconstructing it, right? And it had, like you said, it had all the onsets of being just like kind of like a short filler book with some good takings, because it's even like a small little book, right? It's like a pocket book, So I was like, oh, this will be good for me. I think I'll learn some things. It'll probably continue to spark my education about Buddhism, right? Mm-hmm. Like I like reading about Buddhism, but like you said, I had no idea it was gonna like kind of like you said, turn it up on its head, make you look at it from a different angle, And I think those are some of the best conversations to be had too. Is like when you take something that's common knowledge and just kind of say, but why is that?
Yeah.
Right? Why do we do that? You know? And then so starting at the beginning of the book, where he is, he's at home with his father, right? And he is just something's not right with the Hindu principles, with the various like religious ritualistic things he's going through. He doesn't understand why like sacrifice. He's like, is that the right thing to do? Like, I don't know. Is that going to bring you like the happiness that like you want it to bring? Like, what is it? Why are you doing that? You know? And I think that was an early onset of his inability to settle, right? He just was always looking for answers. Now, do you think, in your opinion, that he came at it the right way in terms of saying, hey, look, you guys are okay with these answers, but I'm not okay, so I'm going to go ahead and search for something else? Or do you think he should have maybe stuck around and like tried to, lean into that lane a little bit more?
I mean, I think to your point, he was an independent thinker.
Yeah.
Right. He thought for himself. And I think he wasn't satisfied with the established knowledge of thought. And when he questioned it, he found things that he felt like the established knowledge of thought wasn't answering for him. So he naturally went and looked outside of it. And, he tried to, these deep questions and these deep thoughts of like, what is our meaning? Why are we here? All these like deep questions, the traditional answers weren't sufficient for him. And, I think if we try to envision ourselves in the Buddha's time to question those things, especially from established leaders and stuff like that, it's kind of not a, thing that's done lightly.
Yeah.
So I felt like, he couldn't suppress those feelings of those questions. So he went and just followed them, and led him down this path that I don't think he expected to be led down.
Right. And, it's interesting too, because, like you said, he was an independent thinker, and he wasn't okay with just accepting that this is how things are, right? And I think that's a big one. I think for me personally too. I think in general, where we say, hey, look, some people are able to drink that Kool-Aid, right? And they don't need deeper explanations. Like, it's all relative, but you don't need a certain level of explanation past a certain point, right? But like for me personally, there's things where like, hey, look, if I question it and you give me an answer and you're like okay with that answer, but I don't understand it and you can't elaborate anymore and make me understand it, then I say, hey, look, I maybe need to just kind of move on and find an answer deeper than this, right? And for me personally, religion was like that a lot for me, where I would be like, I'm going to ask you why we do this, right? I'm going to ask you why we do this. First of all, you're met with resistance when you ask why, and that's a big one. That's a big red flag. But then secondly, when you meet people who are a little bit more well-versed in the religion and they want to communicate with you on it, there's a point where they go, that's just how it is actually. And you have to, and that's the faith component, right? And that's part of religion and things like that. But it seems like Buddha was not able to take that as an answer. He might have needed something more concrete.
So I think he even takes it to the extreme, because he does that in this next stage, right? His first thing is to not become a businessman or lead a life of hedonism. He takes that religious spirituality aspect to the extreme and becomes like an aesthetic, like a samana, like a hermit, like in I think for Christianity analogy, like the Saint Francis of Assisi, who renounced all traditional forms of Catholicism, and not all forms of Catholicism, but in the sense of like being a traditional priest and serving the priesthood, but basically lived as a hermit for several years in the woods and stuff like that. And that's so. I think the interesting part was he's like, okay, I don't have the what you're telling me is not satisfying me, so I will take what you tell me and take it to the extreme and see maybe that will give me the answers. And I think he also finds that doesn't really give him the answers either, you know?
Yeah, and that's a big part of Buddhism, right? It's like So one thing I thought was really like super dramatic was, remember when he was like leaving, when he was gonna leave, he just kind of stood outside all night until his dad like, you know, said he gave him his approval.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, what if your dad never gave you his approval? You're gonna just stand outside for the rest of your life, dude. You don't gotta go to the bathroom or nothing. But anyway, it's like a little semantic, but I think Buddhism in general preaches that. So, you know, you've seen a lot of the normal, so like Hinduism, I'll use that one, right? So you have like, you know, like the, you know, Arjun and all his brothers, like the Pandavas and stuff. Yeah. So what the normal routine for a lot of those stories is like, okay, so there was a problem in the kingdom, right? Yeah. They got exiled and went to nature and became these ascetics, right? Yep. And they learned something, they had an epiphany in nature. And then they came back and like it all was good. They got like the calling and they were good to go. And I think, so he leaves, right? Siddhartha leaves, and then he goes to the woods and becomes this ascetic saman, right? And he accepts that, right? But he doesn't get the epiphany there, right? That's not where it stops. There's like still 2 or 3 more parts of his journey. Because to your point, it's like you can't just be this person who denounces life, right? You have to find a way to mesh into real life by having this level of, and have this level of wokeness where you're not like tied to too many outcomes and things like that. But yeah, I thought that's why I really like Buddhism, man. It's such a practical religion, you know?
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of times people misjudge it and think of it's like this new age, you know, like mushy gushy stuff. And maybe some of the people who preach it or, you know, write stuff about it or speak of it come off that way. But it's like a religion that's thousands of years old and incorporates a lot of things from other religions as well. Hinduism is very much, you know, incorporated in there, and a lot of other deep philosophical concepts are in there. But it's interesting because I like to think of it as like for like Western cultures, it's kind of like a more complex version of Stoicism in a lot of regards. I feel like Stoicism, you know, in like ancient Greece and stuff was like a way of living life, but never considered like a religious aspect, right? But I feel like Buddhism expounds upon a lot of the concepts of Stoicism and takes it into like a metaphysical or spiritual realm kind of thing, and takes it even deeper. Like one of the things I thought that the author did really well was, you know, the about the concept of time in like Buddhism. They don't, and I think he tried to, you know, say it in like his journey, like time is not like a linear thing, but he explains the story in a very linear way. Yeah. For them, like there's no, like time is like this like concept of a circle, like with no end or beginning kind of thing, you know, and hence the, you know, the cycle to break it and all that kind of stuff, you know, not just time, but the wheel of suffering, you know? Yep. I thought the author did a good job of explaining that, because I feel like if you just came off the gate like that, we would have been like, what are you saying? Like, I don't understand this, you know, like, I don't get it. But he's like, you know what? I'm going to put it in a way that it's almost like reading a little bit like poetry. Like some of the way he said it is like flows very quickly. You, like you said, it's a very slim novel, but like it's like a page turner. Like you like maybe take a break and you're like, wait, I'm already this far into the book. Like, oh
yeah, no, I completely agree. And like, you know, along with the environment of being like in nature, right? So, you know, when you denounce something, like I think you inevitably pass judgment on people who consume or interact in that life, right? And he had that. He would be like, hey, you know, I would love to like, you know, this person who's worried about like some worldly thing, I would love to be like that excited about that. You know, I would love to, but you know, life is suffering, life is pain. And he's like he has a little bit of a darker lens, kind of like a judgy lens. And I feel like that is so applicable, right? Like when people are, in general, I feel like when people are not doing well in life, or they have some kind of internal debacle, even in modern day, they're very likely to throw their problems and project it onto somebody else and be like, hey, you know, oh, that dude's, because he's happy, like he sucks, you know, or something like that, right? Yeah. And you kind of like, me personally, right, from experience, I would when I was like not at my best mental state, I would feel like I'd be judgy to other people, man. And and like, you know, now I reflect on that and be like, that's not good. But you know, it's interesting that someone like Herman Hesse is able to do that, because like I said, I've never heard this Buddha story told this way. Yeah. So I wonder I wonder what his experience is, and like how like he might have had some influence on the story as well, you know?
Yeah. So, you know, the interesting thing is like, after I read the book, I did a little research because he has a bunch of other books as well. And so he is obviously German, and he wrote this book, I want to say originally during 1927. So this is right after World War One. So Germany had to bear the brunt of the fallout from World War One, rightfully so. But and right before World War II. Right. So a lot of this, fascist and Nazi elements were starting to emerge during that time. And because the country was going through all this unrest, the people were, unhappy with what was going. They were going through a big depression. Things were, not looking good. And I think he wrote this book because he wanted the people, instead of looking for external, like look outwardly, at their situation, he said, we look inside first. Unfortunately, the culture and the time, this is an oversimplification of it, but but essentially they look for external things to explain it's the Jews that are doing this and all that kind of stuff, instead of looking inwardly to explain this. And I think that's not his only reason of writing this book, but I think a motivation for him to write this book during that time, because he was like, hey, don't look outward, look inside first.
Dude, I gotta read that article, man, or that whatever, because that I did read that this book was written so long ago, but I didn't do that deep dive on that whole post World War I thing, and that makes so much sense why it'd be written the way it is. Context is everything, man. But yeah, like like I said, going back to the book itself, man, I think it's very true. Where the whole concept of looking inward, because like life, you can change like life's lens, and so did Siddhartha, right? You can change your whole life lens by just like worrying about your own problems, right? Like you can't worry about problems externally all the time. It's very tough to worry about things outside of like your locus of control, because you just go mad doing that stuff.
I feel like it's Buddhism is like not the only a religion, or not even Indian culture is like the only thing that preaches this, right? You hear in Western culture, before you can fix other problems outside of you, you have to make sure your own house is in order, right? So I feel like that message is universal across cultures and religions. First, see inward first and fix that, or not, see what's the issue there before you can go and fix all the problems in the world. I feel like oftentimes our generation's guilty of it. We like to travel or do all these other things, maybe when our mind's not right, hoping that the travel or something could fix it outwardly, but we end up just bringing our problems to another country.
Exactly.
It doesn't really fix it. But if we try to look inward first and see what's the issue that's bothering us, and then go and travel, I feel like that will be like it gives us reminders of what's really important in this life.
No, totally. And like your style of travel could be very different, right? Yeah. Like I feel like both of us, we do our thing. We have different types of trips we take, right? Yeah. Like sometimes we're really like turned on a trip, and sometimes we're different, right? But as of late, like we've been going on a few more like reflective trips where like we're not raging as hard. We we do our thing. We can do our thing. But we're like when we went to Scotland, dude, we were like chatting a lot. We took a lot of long car rides, and we were like reflecting, and we were in nature a bunch. You know what I mean? And like as opposed to like I said, maybe a few years ago, we might have gone to like somewhere just to like only turn up and numb ourselves out the entire time, which I would still do with you any day, my friend. But it's like like you said, you can bring your problems somewhere else, right? And you can do that, or you can be in a new environment, and you can understand like different people's stories in those environments and how they've come to fruition and things like that. You know what I mean? So it's just a totally different vibe.
I feel like self-reflection and confronting those things is one of the hardest things a human being can do, because it's not easy.
Yeah.
And I think we as humans, just from my experience being another human,
what's up, human?
I feel like we try to avoid that as much as we can.
We
try to, like you mentioned, like maybe when we were in college or something, we, instead of like asking ourselves what's really bothering us, we would say, you know what, let's just go out tonight. Not saying, at that time, with our understanding and our, limited context, maybe that, that was a one way of dealing it, but, doing that for the rest of our lives, I don't think maybe, you know.
Dude, I feel like it would cause heart problems, it cause like relationship issues, man. You cause hair loss, dude. All those types, you can't harbor those things anymore, dude. And it would almost be like, obviously, you know, you're one of my best friends, and you would like love me if I was, you know, in a bad way, you know. But it's like for me personally, with the state of mind I'm in, I feel like it would be almost selfish of me to like bring a bad version of myself to you in a way that wasn't communicative. Like if I wasn't like, hey, bro, you know, like, I'm kind of feeling down today. Can I talk to you about that? And then we'll have a good time after that. But like, it would almost be bogus for me to come to like a birthday party of yours and be like, dude, you know what, man? I'm just going to go there, and I'm in a bad space. I'm just going to go ruin this dude's birthday party with my issue. You know what I mean? Like, I have to be objective about that, you know?
But I think both me and you have seen people that we know and care about do that same exact behavior, right? Because maybe they don't know how to communicate what they're feeling because they haven't first looked inward, right?
Yeah.
And they go out and just get belligerently drunk and act a fool, and we're like, oh, you know, why is he doing that? And us maybe not knowing, like, hey, maybe something's going on that he hasn't, you know, he or she hasn't been able to look inward and resolve, you know?
Right.
It's not an easy thing to do. And I feel like even now I feel like I'm better at it, but there's days where I'm just like, you know what? I rather, you know, do something outwardly than face what's the real issue inside. You know?
Right. What are your, do you have any what do you call it? Do you have any exercises for self-reflection that you work in?
So I think for me personally, journaling especially helps me form what I'm trying to say. I feel like, especially if I'm holding a lot of anxiety and handling a lot of stress in my mind, I'm not the best communicator, unfortunately, when I'm feeling like that way. So if I journal first and try to put my, like you mentioned, pen to paper earlier, put my thoughts onto paper, I can better formulate what I'm trying to say. So whether it's in my relationship with my wife or with my parents or with you, you know, if I'm feeling bad or I'm feeling something's not right, I can communicate how I'm feeling better if I write it down first.
Yeah.
Because I've learned my nature is, unfortunately, if I don't first write those ideas out, maybe I communicate it in ways that, you know, can be hurtful or destructive, unfortunately, you know?
Totally agree. You know, I learn things a lot, you know, when we discuss stuff like this. Journaling's a big one. I journal too, you know, and I think it's good to have internal dialogues. I walk a lot, you know, and even sometimes when I drive by myself, it's like I'll speak out loud, like to myself, you know, and I'll just be like, and then one of the main things I think that I'll do is once I started having journals for like years, I would go back and read some, and then I would be like, dude, you were kind of negative. Like I was like, you were kind of being like what was wrong with you? You know, like, holy shit. And like, there'll just be like these dark undertones to like everything I'm writing, like, you know, back in like 2016, 2017. And then now, like, you know, I went back and go through like my 2020 journals and my 2021. I'm like, oh dude, there was a paradigm shift somewhere, right? Like where you were complaining about little nuanced things all the time. And you were just like complaining about everything all the time. And now like the complaints are kind of gone, and it's like glass half full versus glass half empty, you know? And then when I started realizing, I'm like, dude, you should make this more of a daily practice. Like you should micro analyze like your thoughts and just be like, dude, is that thought even remotely negative? And if it is, trace it all the way down to the bottom, you know? And those things have been really beneficial for me.
That's amazing that you do that, man, because that's like, you can see, I feel like there's so many benefits you get from that. You can see your growth, your personal growth. You can measure it. You can see like, oh wow, I was feeling this way, now I'm feeling this way. And I feel like you have a better understanding of your emotions and how it affects you, because I feel like oftentimes, as when we were raised from our culture, you know, as males, we're taught maybe emotions, we're just supposed to suppress them and push them aside. But I feel like by you doing that, you have a true understanding of what your emotions, you feel them, you understand them, and then you're better able to not be a slave to them. You're better able to be like, hey, I have emotions, and I'm better able to express them in healthy and constructive ways than just being like a slave to your emotions. Yeah,
gold. That's spot on. And like, you know, not to be all like worked, you know, about it, but like, in our roles, in our professional roles, we work with data every day, right? We work with data, and I don't know, like, one thing that I've realized a lot about that is like, what I would normally do or historically is I'm not applying any work related principles to my personal life, right? But there's some things you can carry over, right? There's definitely project management stuff.
Yeah.
And one thing like data wise that I've noticed is that one piece of data means nothing unless you put it in context, right? Like you have to couple it with another piece of data. Like if I'm going to say, hey, I lifted your whatever, I boosted this 37%. Right. Yeah. Okay, cool. What is the industry average? What is like, what did you do it last year? Right. So, and what were the variables there? Yeah. So then I started just kind of thinking about that in terms of my personal reflection, right? Like, hey, dude, saying you're happy right now, that's a good thing, right? I'm glad that you're happy, but what does that mean in context of like the broader picture, right? Yeah. Saying it in 2022, May, I was happy, but like, were you like, well, how are you last year? How are you the year before that? Has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse? You don't have to form an opinion or anything like that, but what's the state of that year over year and shit like that? You know what I mean?
Otherwise it's just noise, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's just bogus information that is not meaningful, you know? So that's why I thought context was always a good point for me emotionally as well, but it's harder to, because you can't quantify emotions as easily, you know?
That's true.
Yeah, man. But in any case, we'll come back to the book here. Yeah. So he gets into the forest, right? And then he happens upon, he starts hearing about this dude, Gautama, right?
Yeah.
And which is another, mind F, because I thought Siddhartha Gautama was the Buddha, right? That's historically what it is, right? Yep. So he's hearing about this guy, his boy Govind. What, you go ahead?
Fun fact, the name Siddhartha, I found this out recently, means one who achieves his goals in Sanskrit.
Nice. Yeah. That's a good one, dude. Yeah. Sanskrit is a wild language that nobody speaks in, which is weird because all those texts are written in Sanskrit, you know?
Kind of like Latin, right? No
yeah.
I mean, I guess, if you go to a rich enough school, private school, you learn some Latin, shit like that.
Yeah. Dude, so, in my Sunday school, there would be like, so you would get, if you were like, I don't know, like holy enough, you would get selected for this like mission trip that you would take, and you would stay at an ashram for 2 years. And it was usually young men who went, right? And then they would come back and you would fully learn Sanskrit over there. And I would be like, that is only cool in like this setting. You know what I mean? I'd be like, hard flex, man. I wish I could, but like, that's only cool right now, dude.
So is it safe to say you weren't selected because you weren't holy enough?
I wasn't holy enough, man. my unibrow game wasn't strong enough. Too much separation, dude. Yeah, dude.
No, not for you.
Oh, no. 2 eyebrows, too many. Dude, but these guys would go, man, and they would come back, and they would definitely be a little bit more tranquil, man. So I'll give them that. I would go now, like, as a practice. But you go there, there's no TV. It's like fully ashram life, and I'm like, that's pretty cool. But I feel like it's like, dude, what did you send them back with to mesh into normal society? Like, you know what I mean? You gave them like this knowledge. So they were here first in this Sunday school where knowledge was like really only applicable in this Sunday school, right? It was out of like memorizing mantras and stuff like that. That's only applicable in this setting. And then you send them to a totally remote setting where everything they learn is only applicable in that setting. Yep. So you're kind of like forcing them to be a little like a, fish out of water in 2 areas, like, and that's why I, early onset, I was just like, I don't really agree with that type of education. I think it would be beneficial, but like, you come back to Buddhism and you're saying, all right, now this dude was given like the proper material to mesh back into society and not have the same type of stressors that he had initially, you know, but that's not here or there. So this guy, right? His boy Govinda is like, yo, dude, Gautama's like the shit. Like he's got it down, and Siddhartha doesn't believe it. And then he starts upon this tangent about what we were talking about earlier, where he's like, it's not that I don't think Gautama is like smart. It's like I'm a denouncer of doctrines. Like, I don't think that like anyone telling me what is right is actually correct until I figure it out for myself. And then we come to the argument of, or not the argument, the note of, was it knowledge versus wisdom?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think he realizes at the end of the book when he meets up with Govinda again. But I think he has, before then, during that moment, they both travel to visit Gautama, right? Yeah. The Buddha. and they're with his disciples, and Govinda is like enthralled. Like he's like totally like, this is the way, I'm going to follow this dude, and I'm going to be enlightened by following this dude. And then Siddhartha, on the other hand, like you mentioned, he's not easily as convinced. He still has a lot of doubts in his mind, and he goes and he's like reflecting upon it. And one day, I think while he's reflecting upon it, the Buddha meets up with him, and he asks the Buddha, and they have this conversation. And essentially the Buddha says the same thing. Like, it's not something I can just teach you. It's not like knowledge, like, hey, if I need to, build a bookshelf, I can learn watch a YouTube video and I can learn how to build a bookshelf. But sometimes, just doing it by yourself, you learn like the intricacies of the wood that you use and all these other like things that come from just experiencing yourself. And that's that wisdom. And I think that's what he was trying to say. And I think that's what Siddhartha at that time was trying to understand and communicate, but maybe he was still early on in his, journey where he didn't really know how to communicate or say that in a way. He's like, so he knew it deep down, like, I have to keep searching, I have to keep going. I can't stop here. Unlike his friend Govinda, who's like, you know what, I'm going to stay here.
I got it. Yeah. Yeah. And like, kudos to him for Govinda for, finding what he needed. Right. And, just to something I want to peel back with you is, so, there's like a little bit more nuance or specific, right? Yeah. So the author, when they finally meet the Buddha, right? When they finally meet him, they say he's dressed like everybody else. He's doing the same stuff, but they were like, you 100% knew right away that was the Buddha, right? Yeah. And they were like, in the way he was walking, like in the way he was just like discussing things with people, and just his movements were very like, he didn't have any like real intention or haste behind them. He was just kind of frolicking, and he had this like smile to him, and that's a really little detail, but if you like kind of peel that back, right? And when we're talking about the activities we do and stuff like that, like we have like such razor agendas, right? We need to get this done by this time. We compartmentalize things, right? Yep. And one thing that I thought was really interesting, and I try to do, is like leave time, right, where you don't have an agenda, right, where you can just free form go, and I think that's where like some bliss and tranquility comes into play. You know what I mean? So did you pick up on any of that, and if you did, do you do any of that stuff too?
Yeah, definitely. I think I picked up on some of that. I think like you said, I think the word in traditional Buddhist text is an Atman or something like that, where he achieves enlightenment, and that's a man who, or woman who, or being who has achieved enlightenment doesn't really care about the human concept of time anymore. Everything is it's just being in the moment, and I feel like we always get told to just be in the moment, as like, oh, just go and do it, but then I'm like, well, I got all these responsibilities I gotta do, I got all this shit I did in my past that I gotta think about, all these other things on my mind. But like you mentioned, I feel like there's days where you just have a little bit time for yourself, where you don't think about all the responsibilities you have. You don't think about all the things you did in the past, and you just are there, and you are, whatever you're doing, whether it maybe you're just like reading, or you're just, doing, you don't have to be any plan to do anything. You're just there, but whatever it is, you're just there in that moment, and you're fully engrossed in it. And I feel like the more of those moments you have in your life, the more that you're really truly living it, you know? Yeah. Not saying that, and that, a lot of people interpret that to be like, what, I'm not going to plan, I'm not going to reflect, I'm not going to do any of those things. I'm just going to live every day by the seat of my pants, and then, but I think that's a, misinterpretation of that, and to your point, I feel like if you look at the lives of any really creative person or genius, that's how they get their creativity done. It's not like this methodology that's, like this structure, there's structure in their lives to get to that point. But once they actually do their creative thing, it's kind of unstructured, just flowing. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So, I think that was like a long-winded way of getting to your answer. No, I like it, man. I like it. I like all of that detail, dude. And that's what I'm trying to hear. It's really interesting, dude, because like I was saying, we put ourselves in boxes a lot, and it's hard, even in this book, right, Anti-Fragile, we're reading, it's very easy to rationalize doing something. It's hard to rationalize not doing something, right? Like he talks about that whole thing with I forget,
like he talks about, when medicine like intervenes too much sometimes. I forget what the term he uses for it, but he, it's easy to say, hey, look, if you go, let's say you go to the doctor often, right? And it's good to get checked out, right?
Yeah.
But if they're more likely to find something, and if it's, let's say it's like not life-threatening or not major, they might do a test on it. And a lot of tests actually are things that cause it to worsen, right?
Yep.
And like there should be a certain threshold by which you do check it, but there's also no reward given for like not checking it, right?
Yep.
And so like there's always incentive to do it. And coming back to the book here, it's like you don't ever get kudos for your creative time, right? You don't get kudos for like sitting there and pondering, you get kudos and satisfaction internally and externally from checking something off or, going to do this. You get you get sensory rewards, you get sometimes monetary rewards, you get all that stuff. You get more engagement.
And the thing I also realized from that scene where he meets with the Buddha is like also spoke profoundly to me was, not only he didn't, I feel like Siddhartha didn't, even though he had doubts, he didn't think that he knew better than the Buddha. He says, this is a person who has achieved enlightenment in his own path.
Right.
And I also want to achieve enlightenment, but I know that he can't necessarily teach it to me, but that doesn't mean he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Right.
And I thought it was very important because I feel like a lot of times in our modern culture, right, we get told to be independent thinkers and question things. But then we also fall into the trap of having intellectual hubris. And the moment we question things, we think, oh, that person who maybe has studied, X amount of years doesn't know anything that they talk about. And we know better than them. And that's one thing I liked about that scene because he doesn't feel like he knows better. He just says, I just don't think that's going to work for me.
Right. Exactly. And that's a sign of another great example, a display of Buddhism, and also another applicable component, right? Like you get past your initial, people, when you say something to someone, everyone wants to throw in their opinion right away and be like, well, this is why I think it's right. This is why I think, and that's their doctrine. That's like, okay, I'm right about it. But it's like, hey, before, that's a big practice. I don't know. I'm pretty sure you've talked about this with me before. It's like when someone says something to me, let me take away my initial reaction to it because that's all subjective, right? And let me try to get to the heart of what you're saying and how do I learn this? How do I truly like understand you without saying, and then I can say, hey, look, your mode, right? Your mode of life is good for you, right? And my mode of life is going to be something I might take from you, I might not take from you. And I'm happy you shared it with me before. And how would I learn if it's for or not for me if I threw my opinion in right away? You know what I'm saying? And like another quick sign of, Siddhartha maturing a little bit where he can say that as a young individual, and be like, hey, this one's for you. Or, I'm going to go ahead and move along. I'm going to go meet this girl, Kamala, and we're going to do our thing for a little bit too, you know? But anywho,
that was wild when he does all that stuff.
Dude, I thought the thing with with Kamala, like that chick he meets, was another really wild component because they don't really talk about like Buddha, like in traditional sense, being like some kind of like wildly romantic guy, like indulging in love and like those sensual pleasures of like like love making, and he like says a lot of things about. He used some weird pickup line on her where he's like, I want to study your body. And I'm like, I know, Herman, you're trying to come across really like suave with that, but imagine if, Siddhartha, some brown dude, was like, baby, I want to study your body.
Hey.
It worked, bro. It worked.
It worked for Siddhartha. Maybe we should have done it.
I'm going to go see if that works. I'll be right back.
Hello?
But anywho, I had a question that was gonna come out of that. What do you? So I have my thoughts on why she was made a character, right? In this whole like cinematography. Why do you think she was put in this story?
So I think it goes to our earlier discussion about how we think this novel was a rejection of traditional understanding of Buddhist mythology and ethos, and how that you have to absorb this aesthetic way of living, aesthetic way of living. I feel like it was trying to juxtapose that and say, hey, we're gonna show him absorb all these like physical and indulgences and sensual pleasures, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
And it's still going to be an experience where he learns from.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the biggest thing. All the experiences that we have came through in life, whether it's good, bad, whether it's with society, away from society, they're all still experiences that you can learn from and grow and get deeper. And I think that's why he threw it in there, because I think at that time, and people think, to be like a Buddhist, you have to reject society. And he's like, well, you can still achieve enlightenment by being within society. It's all experience. It doesn't matter, right? At the end of the day, how you get there, or how you achieve this, state area of enlightenment, doesn't matter how you get there, as long as you get there, And all these experiences are still valuable teachers.
Yes. It's like, again, what we're saying, you take your opinion out of the mix, and if you experience that experience in full, like, you might learn something, right? And you might take something from it, and it's like, it's only going to make you better. It's only have another, notch on your belt, and you can kind of put your stamp on that.
There's definitely easier ways of learning. But it's I don't think it's a cliche saying, like, experience is the best teacher, right? And I think I think we had a discussion earlier today talking about a little bit about like parenting and people parenting, right? They people always like to shelter their kids and prevent them from experiencing things, because they don't want them to feel hurt and all that stuff. But that feeling of hurt is probably the best teacher they can get. Yeah. And I feel like sometimes, now I'm not a parenting expert, but I feel like sometimes in my own life, my parents have tried to shelter me from things, from realities, just because, not because they were trying to do me a disservice, because that's what they thought would help me.
Right. Right.
But instead, it removed me from learning a lesson or an experience that could have benefited from me at the end of the day.
Totally. So, yeah, like shielding, shielding and things like that. Like we were talking about with the anti-fragile stuff too, going back to that book, right? Small bits of volatility that aren't going to harm you are going to make you better. You're going to learn from those types of things. And then, the human body needs that too, go ahead.
And I think at the same time, it also shows him, they also put that in there to show that that's just one way of learning, but it's not also the way. And it shows him, because he obviously goes through this thing where he still does all those things and still feels empty and hollow and unfulfilled inside. He's like, well, I did the whole samana aesthetic way. Now I'm going to do the opposite, go back into society and be a great businessman and be a gambler and do basically live a very earthly and worldly life, and not, and basically reject everything from my spirituality. And he realizes that wasn't the way either, because he's still no better than when he went first into the forest.
Exactly. And that's such a good point, because he, I feel like there was so many layers to like hit that part of that chapter. So he got like a pretty girl. He was doing his thing with her. They were hooking up, doing their thing. He's out and about, being a good merchant, gambling and stuff like that. But like you said, all the while, even when he was being a merchant, right? So he had none of like the real savviness of like a merchant. So his his superior, whatever the dude, his boss was like saying, he didn't have that, but he was still able to like make deals and be successful through his like ability to have some tranquility, right? So he would, the guy would say, so there was one time he went to like a village or something like that. And he didn't come back with like any profit. He just went there and had lunch and something like that, right? And his boss is like all pissed at him. He's like, yo, what? You wasted a whole day. He's like, no. He's like, the next time I go over there, they're going to know me. I've made a connection with them. And that's like some really sales type stuff, right? Like planting the seed, relationship building. But I think in that time too, that dude was probably like they're probably like, oh my God, this guy is crazy. Like he didn't like bring anything, no wealth back. Yeah. And another sign of like, it doesn't always have to be like you're questioning and you're being like, how do I put it? You're being negative about what you're engaging with. It can just be that, hey, I'm doing well. I'm doing good at this. It's just not, I just don't feel like it's going to be the one for me, I just have to move on. It doesn't always have to be like a terrible experience,
Yeah. I think it shows that, I think, I'm pretty guilty of this too. You know, like we want to achieve things, you know, in this life, you know, whether it's a certain status or a certain, you know, prestige at work or, you know, a title or, you know, like, you know, material wealth or stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you know, it's all like kind of meaninless, you know.
Yeah,
at the end of the day, you can't like bring it with you, you know, when you die, you know, and all these other things, you know. I mean, I feel like we hear it, but in that, we've heard it before. We heard all these sayings like, you know, you can work hard and be the greatest person, you know, who achieved this, but at the end of the day, when you die, you're going to return to the dust like everybody else, you know. And I think while he's going through that entire experience, he has that internal voice saying that, like, this is like still like meaningless. This is not, he's not achieving that level of enlightenment, even though he's indulging in all this stuff and, you know, being like one of the best at his craft, or, you know, doing that, you know, and he's like a good gambler in the beginning, you know. I think he kind of, you know, ends up being a terrible gambler later because because he's, you know, so depressed, you know, that he's not achieving what he wants to achieve. I think you hear that a lot with people who have reached high heights in their field or whatever, that they've reached the mountaintop, but it still feels meaningless.
Right.
And I think that's profound because they went through all that effort, went through all that thing, and they think they reached a destination. And then when they get there, they're like, well, no, it's just, you know.
Wasn't as cool as I thought it was going to be up here, dude. Yeah.
You know? Totally.
And it's interesting, you know, because like, you know, we always talk about the present and right now. And what I thought throughout the whole book, which was good, was anybody who you were to model yourself after in that book, like, you know, Gautama or any of the people that he was like, you guys got it.
Yeah.
He always, the Herman Hesse always describes a level of contentment that these people have, right? Mm-hmm. He's very keen on saying these people are content, you know, like he uses synonyms of that. Mm-hmm. And then when Siddhartha finally comes to fruition, right? And he talks about that contentment. He says he wasn't too happy and he wasn't too sad. Yeah. And he always was in this level of contentment. And it's like that, it's such another applicable moment. It's like, are we chasing this euphoric feeling? Are we trying to always be like, oh, this is amazing, I love it, you know? And or is the goal to be like, you know, I'm in a state of tranquility, of peace, and like things are going well, and I don't feel like I have to, you know, I don't feel like I have enough of my space, you know. It's like I feel good about life, you know. Those types of things and that's a really solid question. I think that like I ask myself on a daily basis is like, are you content? And I don't want to ask myself if I'm happy, you know, all the time, because you're not always going to be happy.
Because I think it goes to that, you know, Chinese idea of duality, yin and yang, you know, balance. You know, I think, you know, the author tries to push that, you know, hard during this, and I think that's the overarching. You know, he goes through different extremes in his life, but only to get at the end, you know, a place where Siddhartha is at, you know, balanced. You know,
right?
Because like you said, you know. A life that's only made of good things, we think that is like, oh, if it's my life is only good, I'll have no problems, you know, it'll be perfect. But you wouldn't be content because it's unfortunately the bad things that make the good things worth it, right?
Right.
And you don't want to have obviously a life full of just bad things either. It's achieving that balance, you know, throughout life. And like you said, I think that's what makes a contented life. You know, you're never too high, you're never too low. Like you said, that's a very strong concept in Stoicism. You know, don't get too high, don't get too low. You just, you know, are very pragmatic about the things that happen in life, you know?
Yep.
And you're like, hey, it is the way it is, but, you know, life goes on and we find a way to overcome it and move on and move forward to the next thing.
Right.
You know?
Spot on, man. And even at work, you know, work culture is a big thing, right? In this day and age, you know, and I think we've both probably been a part of some toxic environments, you know, but is the goal to get into an environment where we're all like, hey, you know, like there's a keg at the office or like we're all like doing happy hours of time. Is that the goal, to always be like, just like laughing and joking at work? And I would say, you know, if you find that, maybe it's really good. Right. But, you know, when you get into a better work culture, you're like, hey, you know, and I'm not saying tolerance is the same as contentment, but it's like if you can tolerate this work environment and there's not too much toxicity, and you could feel like you can get your work done and you can just do things and have a level of contentment, that's all the work culture I need at baseline, right? Anything else is like a nice to have, right? But at baseline, if I can tolerate you and like we can work together and get things done, then I don't really have to like you too much. You know what I mean? I like in that sense, in that realm, you know?
It's nice if we all become, you know, friends after all, but it's not a requirement, you know?
Right. We just kind of got to get it done. But anywho, so, you know, we come upon the last chapter, which is the ferryman, right? So he leaves and he's like, man, I another bust here, but I learned about the sensual side of life, you know, and things like that. And so he's initially not looking for this guy, right? He's just looking for something else. So he happens upon the same ferryman who took him across like the water at first. And then he starts on this journey with him where all they're doing is they're fixing this ferry, they're taking people across, and they're going up the mountain, and he starts learning from the river.
Yep.
Now, you know, in terms of the river, he hears a lot from it, right? He hears like kind of like this consistent like hum, you know, this consistent like kind of like almost like an ohm sound coming from it. And he also learns a lot from the old guy himself, right? And the old guy had his own journey and things like that. But any early onsets, what did you think about their dynamic?
I think he was like the teacher. He wasn't so much of like a teacher, but like a guide for him. That's what I think it was. Like when we think of like a teacher, we're thinking of someone you sit and they, you know, tell me the knowledge. But this ferryman taught Siddhartha things, but not because he was like directly speaking them to him, but he was guiding him. And whether the ferryman knew it or not, or whether Siddhartha knew it or not, that was the interesting part. But I think his presence and him, moving him through different events that happened in that stage was kind of like he was kind of like for Siddhartha, if you're gonna enlighten, like translate it to an analogy of like he was in a dark cave and he's trying to find his way out. That ferryman was kind of like the light or the torch for him to find him, because at the end of the day, Siddhartha was still able to do it himself, but he needed that assistance to be that illumination for him.
Nice.
In a way.
No, that is
a dark cave.
That's a great analogy. Because like you said, the darkness, the cave you're speaking about is his inability to just kind of find his way, right? Find what was good for him. And so he had all these high aspirations of like these great people he was going to meet. And this ferryman was just that. He was a guide. And like he thought at the end of this tunnel was going to be some profound thing. It's like, no, simplicity is the key here, right? And what's interesting is, you know, they bring in this kid, right? That ferryman's kid, and how that kid didn't want to be like a ferryman like his father, right? Yep. And the kid was just resisting. And then Siddhartha is seeing this cyclical thing happen again, where what happened to him. Yep. And then it finally just settles in with those little analogies between this ferryman and his son. He's like, oh shit. Like I have what I need actually. You know, I found everything I need. The real gain is in the pursuit here. It's not it's in simplicity, it's in contentment. It's not in anything, you know, and it's going to be his own. He's going to have his own brand of it. But I can't tell you what it is, but that's what the wisdom is.
And I think even the author realizes that I think he tries to be like that ferryman for us while he moves us through this novel.
Nice.
But at the end of the day, it's still for us to find that wisdom at the end of the book for ourselves. You know, there's no like one profound saying at the end of the conclusion that just says, bam, here's the nugget of wisdom.
Yeah.
You know, we still, when we're reading through it, it's up to us to find that. And if we don't, you know, maybe we should read it again, or, you know,
do a podcast on it.
Yeah, something like that.
That's why I wanted to do this, because you hit it right on the head, man. Because I was like, dude, you know, the book was so captivating, so I breezed through it because I was waiting. You know, you're reading all these experiences, you're waiting for that. Okay, what does he find at the end of the book? Like, what is this secret sauce? And then you get it, and it just ends, and you're like, well, I guess I'll go fuck myself, you know. But then like, you know, as I was going back through this book, you know, and like kind of pairing it with the other stuff I read about Buddhism, I was like, oh, dude, you learn tidbits along the way, you know. every chapter you're learning about different parts of life.
Yep.
And you don't, that's a problem with reading. Cause like again, we get so captivated with finishing the book that we don't think about the learnings along the way. So I'm like, I'm going to go back, I'm going to write some things down, I'm going to highlight things and try to like talk to somebody who's read it and be like, what did you think about that too?
The nice part about this book is I feel like it's like you mentioned, it's a short book earlier. So if you ever feel like, hey, you read it once and you want to pick it up again and reread it, I feel like it's a book that can be reread multiple times and you will gain different and maybe even deeper and deeper insights every time you read it, So it's not like a big biblical level text where it's like thousands and thousands of pages, and it flows pretty nicely. That's the one thing about the author. I think I read somewhere that he eventually won a Nobel Prize for literature.
Nice.
But he's still, relative obscurity. I think he really got popular in the 60s, when they had that whole counterculture or hippie movement. It was like him and a bunch of other authors that fit in that similar vein. But that's when he really got, into the American, cultural lexicon and ideology and stuff like that. So, circling back, I feel like every time I've read it, since I originally read it, I think in high school, and I'll be honest, I read like halfway through it and I was like, I don't understand this thing.
Right.
And then I spark notes the rest of it. And then I went back last year, reread it again. I was like, wow, this is really profound. It's actually one of my favorite books of all time now. And I was like crazy because I felt like when I was in high school, I was like, how could I not like see this or made profound impact on me? Because I think at that time I wasn't ready to read stuff like this, not just from like a maturity state. My mind wasn't ready to accept this type of way of thinking and knowledge. Not just because I wasn't mature enough. I could have been like, if you approach this book not ready to give up a little bit of control and let it, like the ferryman guide you. If you want to dictate it, you might be unhappy where you are with the end of this book. I kind of think like, honestly, some of the best times to read this book is probably when you are going through a period of transition.
I would agree.
Because I feel like then you're more open to receiving these type of ideas.
Yep.
If you are content or maybe have a preconceived way of notion coming into this book, I feel like the book will be less effective or you'll be less receptive.
Right.
To it,
No. So it's like, do it if you're searching, right?
Yep.
Do it if you need an answer. It's not going to give you an answer by any means, but it's going to give you the tools to search for it in a more like direct way.
Yeah.
But, dude, I think we can end on that note, man. We did like a little over an hour, right? That went by pretty quick, right?
It felt like,
Yeah, man. So, dude, I would on this last note, I want to say, read this book. Hey. And thanks for coming on, bro.
For sure.
Love you, man.
Appreciate it. Love you too, man.
Peace.